question for Secretary Jordan, if I might. With a pretty big, massive, comprehensive tax reform package, you did a lot on the individual side, but not much, if anything, on the corporate side. Can you give any directions of what happens at the state level when you're trying to do comprehensive tax reform, and what happens with those players? And I think may be of great interest.
The Congressman knows when I was in the Senate, I wrote a lot of economic development incentive programs, and we had a lot of discussions about that while we were serving together. But we are, like all states, have a significant package of incentives and tax credits to offer to C Corps to come to our state, and probably as competitive as any state, obviously, in those packages. We actually, the Governor's desire was to lower corporate income tax to zero. And when we started having those meetings, we actually found that some of our C Corps, some of our corporations would rather be incentive and tax credit members rather than a zero tax credit at this time, and we had a hard time doing it. So we actually did not lower the corporate income tax rate in Kansas at this time. We'd still like to work on that. We'd still like to work with the corporate community to make that happen. Right now, 59.6% of our C Corps pay no income tax in Kansas because of the incentive and tax credit programs. And again, my statistics, when 98% of your businesses are 100 employees less, 77% of them are 10 employees or less, and by all statistics, whether some say 2/3 of your job creation comes out of small business, some say 75% come out of small business, we decided to swing very quickly over to small business, who many times can't take advantage of the incentive and tax credit programs because the thresholds are so high, it's hard for them to take advantage of it. So we swung and decided we would work what we can to help small business grow in the state of Kansas.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. A question from Secretary Ching as well, if I would. What do you hear from small businesses in particular as their biggest complaint about the Federal Government and the Federal policies and regulations? If you give us a little insight there.
Mr. Congressman, I think the main thing they say is there's too much of everything, too much regulation, too many things coming down the line, and the uncertainty. Being from Virginia, we have a very large military presence, very large U.S. government civil service sector too. So worries of sequestration and what follows are very concerning. So we hear that especially from our small business community, who are the most affected by little shifts in policies and spending. So all the regulation, perhaps even uncertainty in health care, taxation, and government spending, all are a big part of it. So if they knew what was coming down the line, they could adjust. But since they don't know, they're all very worried.
Gentleman from Texas and South Dakota, if you have a comment.
I'd echo the comments there. Uncertainty is huge. That's why in Texas we've made that a focal point to make sure that that things are not changing, but that uncertain efforts at the state, federal level has a certain impact on the small business in Texas.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that, in business world, people just want to understand what the rules of the game are, but when the rules keep changing, it's challenging for them. So to know that the regulatory process was going to be consistent, the tax policy was going to be consistent, that there was a fiscal balanced budget from a federal level would be very helpful. All those things weigh into it.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. Yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.